cold wind swept across the sprawling Texas plains as dusk bled into a star-pricked night. In the fading light of a withering day, a lone carriage rattled slowly along a dust-choked road, its wheels leaving fleeting traces in the hardened earth. Inside, Maribel Ortiz clutched a thin shawl around her shoulders, her eyes haunted by memories of scorn and rejection, cast out from her town for bearing a child out of wedlock, a child conceived in whisper and coercion. Maribel now journeyed into uncertain exile with her newborn daughter, Rosa. Each bump of the carriage against the rough road echoed the heartbeat of a mother desperate to escape the judgment and cruelty that had marred her past. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. Maribel's heart pounded with a mix of terror and defiant hope as she recalled a moment when the townsfolk's hateful eyes had flared like wildfire, condemning her to a fate of solitude. The narrow streets of her former home, once filled with the soft murmur of neighborly chatter, had turned hostile in an instant. She had been cast out without a word of mercy, her only inheritance the bitter shame and the fragile life now nestled against her breast. Now, under a sky drifting with swirling snow and piercing cold, Maribel's every breath was a prayer for a new beginning. After hours of uneasy travel, the carriage finally reached a remote stretch of land where the horizon melted into an endless expanse of white and gray. Here stood the McKenna Ranch, a weathered homestead tucked away amid a copse of hardy mesquite and pecan trees. The ranch house, built of rough-hewn logs and faded planks, exuded both quiet resilience and sorrowful isolation. It was said that the ranch had once been a haven for lost souls, a place where even the bitterest wounds could find healing among the dusty winds and starry skies. At the creaking, oil-lamp-lit door of the ranch, Maribel hesitated, every instinct in her being urged her to retreat, to hide in the shadow of her disgrace. Yet the food and shelter it promised were too vital to refuse, and perhaps, in this secluded corner of the frontier, she might forge a redemption that everyone in her old town had denied her. With trembling determination, she stepped forward and knocked. The sound of the knock echoed softly across the silent expanse, melding with the mournful cry of a distant coyote. Moments later, the door creaked open to reveal a man whose countenance was as weathered as the land itself. Tall and lean, with eyes the color of burnished copper and skin tanned by unforgiving sun, he regarded her with a quiet, unreadable expression. He was known as Tall Bear, a Comanche warrior who had long walked the fringes of settler society, a man both revered and feared for his combat prowess and his secret heart. His attire was simple yet striking, a faded shirt, sturdy trousers, and a worn leather cloak draped over a broad shoulder, its hem embroidered with symbols of his tribe. "Who come seeking refuge?" Tall Bear intoned, his voice low and resonant, as if echoing from deep canyons. There was a cautious kindness in his tone, a glimmer of understanding, as if he recognized the pain carved into Maribel's features. Maribel's voice, small yet steady, broke the silence. "My name is Maribel Ortiz. I have been cast out. I have nowhere else to go. I beg you for shelter, for myself and my daughter." She held Rosa close, the infant soft, cooing breath a fragile beacon amid the chill. Tall Bear studied her intently for a long moment. His dark eyes seemed to pierce the layers of fear and sorrow surrounding her. Then, without a word, he stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. The door revealed a modest parlor, its walls adorned with simple paintings that captured the rugged beauty of the outskirts, and a fire that glowed warmly in a stone hearth. The room carried the rich aroma of burning mesquite and curing hides, a sanctuary against the bitter cold outside. Inside, as Maribel entered cautiously, Tall Bear helped her settle near a rough wooden bench. There, on a low table, lay a carved wooden token, a small totem etched with sun and the silhouette of a soaring eagle. Its craftsmanship was delicate yet enduring, a symbolic reminder that even in the vast harshness of the frontier, hope could be carved out of necessity. Maribel's eyes followed his steady hands as he retrieved the token and held out to her. "Take this," he said simply, the gesture imbued with silent compassion. "It is a sign that you are not alone." Maribel accepted the token with trembling fingers, feeling its smooth surface cool against her skin. Its touch seemed to quietly mend the jagged edges of her shattered hope. Across the dusty room, a portrait hung on the wall, a faded snapshot of family long past, yet it resonated with echoes of warmth and belonging. In that moment, Maribel understood that perhaps the McKenna Ranch, despite its solitude, could offer her a slender thread of redemption. Later, as she nursed a cup of weak tea by the fire, Maribel listened to the rustle of wind outside and the quiet murmur of the land. Outside the window, nearly hidden in the swirling snow, she caught a glimpse of a lone rider, a man whose silhouette was framed by a towering mesquite. For a fleeting instant, his gaze met hers in the distance, and a chill ran down her spine. She recalled whispered tales in her former town about a Comanche warrior with secret wealth, a man whose solitary vigil was as enigmatic as it was fated. Had that man, too, been watching from afar? The thought kindled unease, stirring memories of judgment and estrangement. Inside, Tall Bear's presence was a steady force. He moved silently about the room, stoking the fire and mending a frayed piece of the ranch's old tapestry. His calm efficiency spoke of years spent in the harsh wilderness, battling both nature and the prejudices of a settler world. In the quiet interlude between his work, he occasionally exchanged glances with Maribel, each look laden with unspoken assurances that here, in this remote haven, she might begin to heal. As the night deepened, a soft knock at the door, one that was gentle yet insistent, drew their attention once again. Maribel's heart clenched. The memory of her disgrace, of the painful parting from her kin and community, flooded her thoughts. Yet, with the wooden token in her hand and the silent strength of Tall Bear at her side, she felt a budding courage that defied the sting of old wounds. Slowly, she rose and moved toward the door, every step measured and tentative. Tall Bear followed, his eyes dark and vigilant. Maribel opened the door a crack, and the biting cold swept in, carrying with a scrap of paper fluttering on the wind. She retrieved it with care and unfolded it, discovering in hurried script a single sentence: "Your past is not forgotten. The tide is coming." The cryptic message, signed with an inexplicable initial that sent shivers down her spine, confirmed her worst fears. Those she sought to leave behind would not so easily relinquish their claim. In the still, icy air of that fateful night, Maribel clutched the scrap to her heart, the wooden token, the sign of protection given by Tall Bear, and the fleeting warmth of the ranch beckoned her toward a future that was uncertain yet filled with the possibility of redemption. With resolutions forming in her trembling voice, she turned back to the comforting glow of the hearth and the steady presence of the warrior who had wrapped him in his cloak of compassion. And in that shared silence, a new chapter of survival and perhaps healing began amidst the unforgiving wilderness. The soft knock at the door and the cryptic note, "Your past is not forgotten. The tide is coming," signed with chilling initial, left Maribel Ortiz trembling at the threshold of the McKenna Ranch. Outside, the moon's pale light revealed a landscape of gnarled mesquite and frost-laden plains, while inside the parlor the comforting glow of the hearth belied the urgent threat that tonight had brought. Maribel's heart fluttered with apprehension as she clutched the carved wooden token Tall Bear had entrusted to her, a small, intricately etched symbol of hope and survival that seemed to pulse with both promise and unspoken sorrow. Tall Bear, his countenance grave and inscrutable, stood nearby in the shadows of the entryway, his deep-set eyes, like dark pools reflecting countless hardships on the unforgiving Texas frontier, flickered with concern as he regarded the note in Maribel's shaking hands. Without a word, he stepped forward, his broad frame casting a reassuring shadow over her. Though his silence spoke volumes, his measured nod and the careful, almost tender tap on his chest conveyed a promise. He would not allow the past to reclaim her without a fight. For a long moment, neither spoke. The note's message reverberated in the still air, intertwining with the soft coos of little Rosa, Maribel's vulnerable newborn, who lay wrapped in a faded blanket on a nearby cot. The infant's delicate breathing merged with the crackling of the fire, a gentle, life-affirming cadence amid the tension of that anxious night. Maribel's gaze drifted to Tall Bear, searching his weathered expression for clues. "Do you know who might send such a message?" she whispered, voice barely rising above the sound of the wind outside. Her question was fraught with the terror of deep-seated memories. Memories of the town that had cast her out, of whispered accusations, and the relentless judgment of those who had never understood her. Tall Bear's reply was measured, his deep voice low and imbued with an unspoken vow. "The letter comes from ghosts of a past not easily shaken off," he said softly. His eyes flashed momentarily, with a pain that suggested personal loss. "I have seen riders on these plains before, and sometimes fate sends warnings in forms we scarcely dare to understand." He paused, glancing at the note once more before tucking it into the worn leather of his satchel. "We must be vigilant, Maribel. The tide, as it says, may bring more than just memories." Outside, a chill wind carried the scent of mesquite smoke and distant pine. Soon, the crunch of fresh hoofprints in the snow outside the ranch's weathered steps confirmed what their hearts already feared. Someone or something from the past was drawing near. In the periphery of Maribel's vision, she caught a glimpse of a dark silhouette moving deliberately along the fence, its outline fleeting but unmistakably human. The sight stirred a whirl of emotions within her. Dread mingled with a simmering determination. She thought of the harsh words that had once condemned her, the relentless cruelty that had forced her to flee with little more than a child and a shattered reputation. The atmosphere in the ranch grew heavy as Tall Bear led Maribel toward a small, curtained parlor in the back, a quiet room where the wind's cry was reduced to a mournful murmur. Here, by a low wooden table and under the steady vigil of a battered oil lamp, they began to piece together a plan. Maribel retrieved her shawl from a low hook by the door, the fabric soft despite years of wear, and draped around her shoulders as if it might shield her from unseen torments. Tall Bear unfolded an old map of the region, its edges tattered and scorched by the relentless Texan sun, and spread it gently on the table, tracing in a deliberate, slow motion the routes that carved the vast wilderness. Many who are cast out carry their own burdens. Tall Bear said quietly as he ran a callous finger along one of the marked trails. Sometimes they returned not for revenge, but for redemption. His eyes met Maribel's in a silent pact of understanding. In that moment, the wooden token in her hand seemed to glow faintly, a small spark of light against the encroaching shadows of her past. Meanwhile, little Rosa stirred in her crib, her soft coos a tender echo in the oppressive quiet. Margaret, the orphan child whom Maribel had come to care for back in another life before her exile, appeared at the doorway of the parlor. Though still young, Margaret's solemn eyes carried an old soul's wisdom and a silent plea for belonging. "Mama," she whispered, her voice fragile yet filled with quiet hope, "I'm not afraid. I think the night holds promise, too." The simplicity of her words brought a small, bittersweet smile to Maribel's face, momentarily dispelling the icy grip of fear. As the night deepened and the threat outside seemed to swell at a low, insistent tide, Tall Bear's keen eyes ventured toward the door once more. A soft moan of wind was suddenly pierced by the sound of something distinct, a metallic clink, followed by a brief rustling at the threshold. The sound was so fleeting that for an instant it resembled little more than the sigh of a land, yet it carried with it the unmistakable charge of danger. Maribel's hand went to her heart, the scrap of fabric she had clutched earlier now pressing as a tangible reminder of all that she had lost. She exchanged a startled glance with Tall Bear. "They are here," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. The phrase, heavy with both resignation and defiance, hung in the air as if to seal her fate. Tall Bear moved to the door, his body tensing, every muscle coiled for the coming confrontation. He opened the door just a crack, peering out into the darkness. For a moment, nothing but the swirling snow and the muted calls of distant coyotes answered. Then, almost imperceptibly, his sharp eyes caught a flash of movement, a drifting feather landing lightly on the snow outside. It was a single delicate plume, its color an arresting contrast to the white and dark, and it bore a marking scratch faintly upon its surface, a symbol perhaps left by the mysterious rider whose presence had loomed in Maribel's nightmares. The feather, as light as the promise of dawn, fell onto the threshold where the note had once been discovered. Its silent message was clear. Whoever rode in had a message of their own, one that blended beauty with warning. Maribel, staring at the delicate artifact, felt a stirring within her, a quiet determination to face her past head-on. "I will not be haunted forever by what I was," she said, her voice firmer now, resonating with the resolve of a woman reborn. "I choose to stand in the light and claim my future." Her words, simple yet powerful, filled a small room with a flicker of hope. Tall Bear nodded, his features softening in approval. "The night is long and the past sometimes rides before us," he said, his voice low but confident. "But together we can outrun its shadows." His hand, steady and reassuring, briefly enveloped hers, a silent, powerful vow of protection. Outside, the rustle of the wind subsided, replaced by the subtle creaking of the ranch as it prepared for the new day. The mysterious feather lay where it had fallen, a silent testament to the warnings of the past and an omen of potential deliverance. In the stillness that followed, Maribel and Tall Bear shared a look filled with unspoken questions and quiet resolve. Their bond, forged in the crucible of exile and tempered by the trials of the frontier, had grown stronger. The presence of that single feather, coupled with the ominous note and the fleeting figure of a mysterious rider, enmeshed their fates in a tapestry of redemption, defiance, and hope. As the moon waned into the soft glow of early dawn, the thread pursuer still lingered like a shadow behind the curtains of the night. Yet inside the sanctuary of the McKenna Ranch, with the carved token, the locket, the scrap of familiar fabric, and now the solitary feather as symbols of their intertwined past and future, Maribel felt a stirring of new strength. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but she no longer trembled alone in the dark. With a final, resolute glance at the door and a silent promise shared with Tall Bear, Maribel wrapped her shawl tighter around her and stepped boldly toward the light of the coming dawn. Outside, amidst the cold whisper of the frontier, the promise of redemption and renewal began its slow, unwavering ascent, a promise that, no matter how formidable the past, a future built on courage and trust was well within reach. The silence that followed the delicate feather's discovery remained heavy and unsettling, as if the very air at McKenna Ranch vibrated with secrets. In the dim light of early pre-dawn, Maribel Ortiz stood in the threshold of the modest cabin, her hands still trembling from the chill and from the weight of cryptic note. The feather, a single, elegant plume marked with an unfamiliar symbol, lay like a whispered omen on the threshold. Its softness and strange marking spoke of a presence that had come not to harm but to remind, a touch of fate from a past that refused to be forgotten. Tall Bear watched her with his steady, dark eyes. His broad, weathered face was etched by countless winters on the Texas frontier, carrying both scars and unspoken wisdom. In the quiet that followed, he spoke almost unconsciously. "Your past rides with you, Maribel, like winter's chill that lingers even after the storm has passed." His words, sparse and resonant, drew a long exhale from her. Maribel wrapped her threadbare shawl tightly around her shoulders. The fabric, worn soft by years of hardship and careful use, was the only barrier between her and the unforgiving cold, and now, between her and the ghosts of her past. "I will no longer hide in these shadows," she murmured, voice quiet yet resolute. "If the tide is coming, I must learn to swim against it, or I will surely drown." Within the dim parlor, the low light from an oil lamp danced over the carved wooden token resting on a rough-hewn table, its intricate designs a symbol of hope in such desolation. Tall Bear's gloved hand brushed the token absently before he set it with careful reverence beside the note. "This token has protected many who've wandered these lands," he said, his tone measured. "It is a reminder that even those cast out may find sanctuary if they are brave enough to seek it." Outside, the wind howled softly through the frost-clad mesquite, carrying with it the faint, mournful cry of a distant coyote. It mingled with the memory of the earlier knock, a sound that had foretold danger and set in motion the events of the night. Maribel's thoughts turned to the note's chilling warning, signed with a single enigmatic M. Every syllable of that message echoed with the bitter taste of betrayal and a relentless judgment that had once forced her from her home. As the first light of dawn crept hesitantly over the sprawling Texas plains, Tall Bear led Maribel to a narrow table near one of the cabin's small, frost-rimed windows. The wooden floor creaked under the weight of their measured steps. He unfolded an aged map of the region. Its edges curled like the wings of crows that often circled above the barren hillside. With a deliberate, slow gesture, he traced a route with a callous finger. These lands are treacherous, and many who roam them carry burdens that follow like a shadow, he intoned. His eyes, soft yet troubled, revealed that the warrior, too, was haunted by a past he could neither easily dismiss nor fully atone for. Maribel nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the map, but her mind far away. I remember whispers from my town, she confessed quietly, of those who would hunt a woman who dared to bear a child out of wedlock, and of debts that cling to you like the winter's frost. Her voice trembled with the residual fear of scorn and the burden of personal shame. I thought I had left that behind, she added, but it seems the past is a way of finding even the most hidden souls. A soft coo from little Rosa, nestled in a small cradle by the door, reminded them of the fragile hope for the future. The newborn's gentle sound was a balm to the present, a promise that something pure and unspoiled still existed in the midst of so much desolation. Just then, an almost imperceptible sound outside, a faint rustling as if the wind carried more than just snow, drew their attention to the wide, frost-covered expanse beyond the cabin. Tall Bear's gaze darted toward the door, and then toward the dark outline of a rider moving slowly along the ridge. Although the figure was cloaked in shadow, a flash of movement, a glint of metal that might have been a knife or a ring, suggested deliberate intent. His presence, mentioned only in rumor until now, loomed over them like an unanswered question that would not let the silence rest. Maribel's heart pounded anew, and she clutched the note and the wooden token as if they were talismans against the past. "What does it mean, this rider, this sign?" she whispered, voice breaking with a mix of terror and defiance. Tall Bear studied the approaching silhouette for a moment, his expression guarded yet compassionate. "The rider is a mystery," he murmured. "Some say he is a wealthy guardian who walks these lands in secret. Others believe he is a harbinger of old wrongs. I do not know his true nature, but he watches, and now he seems to be drawing near." With a tilt of his head, Tall Bear motioned toward the window, where fresh tracks in the damp, icy ground marked a clear trail toward the back of the ranch. Each hoofprint was a deliberate stamp against the snow, evidence that someone or a group was advancing with determined purpose. The stark reality of their situation crystallized within Maribel's chest. Her past, with all its shame and cruelty, was not merely a memory, but a living, breathing threat. In that tense moment, as the delicate interplay of hope and fear surged between them, Maribel slowly unfastened a scrap of fabric from her shawl and pressed it against her heart. "I will confront this tide," she said, her voice growing steady with each word. "Not as a victim, but as a survivor." Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, held a defiant spark, a declaration that she would not allow her past to dictate her future any longer. Tall Bear's broad hand gently lifted her chin to meet his gaze. "Together, we will face these shadows," he promised, his deep tone resonating with an unyielding resolve. His look, a careful blend of protection and intimacy, conveyed that his past, a burden of loss and exile, had forged within him a heart capable of understanding pain and offering redemption. Their shared silence was broken only by the soft cooing of Rosa and the subtle rustle of the wind outside. Yet amid that quiet, the ominous sound of an approaching rider grew louder. The silhouette on the ridge paused again, this time more clearly outlined against the sky, gradually lightening with the first hints of dawn. A glint, a small, unmistakable flare of silver, caught Maribel's eye as the rider's hand rested upon what appeared to be a finely wrought knife hung at his belt. The detail was striking against the roughness of his figure, a nuanced message, Perhaps that he was not simply a harbinger of doom, but a man bound by his own codes and contradictions. Margaret's distant, soft words, "The night may be broken, but the stars still shine," echoed in Maribel's ears, a child's innocent hope intertwined with the vastness of the frontier. And in that echo, Maribel found a momentary solace, a belief that even in darkness, one might discover the light necessary to forge a path forward. Without breaking the silent pact between them, Tall Bear retrieved a worn, leather-bound journal from a crevice in the cabin's wall, a relic he had kept since his younger days. Flicking open the brittle pages, he found a sketch of the very symbol that now adorned the feather and the wooden token. He traced the lines with a calloused fingertip, murmuring, "This mark belongs to a long-forgotten promise, a promise to protect those cast aside." His voice was heavy with the weight of memory and regret, and for a moment, Maribel glimpsed the pain that had driven him to wander these lands in exile. The truth, concealed within the intricate designs on the feather and token, now called to them with quiet urgency. Maribel knew she must seek answers, even if they lay buried beneath the tumult of her past. "We cannot hide forever," she said, her voice low yet unyielding. "Nor can I let these ghosts haunt me any longer. I must know who sends these warnings and why." Her declaration, raw and piercing the cold morning air, mingled with the resolute nod Tall Bear offered in return. As the first rays of dawn broke fully over the horizon, casting long, pale shadows across the snow-crusted ranch, the mysterious rider's figure shifted and vanished into the distance, leaving behind a swirl of dust and unanswered questions. Yet he had left a final sign, a tiny scrap of paper, fluttering at the edge of the hoofprints, inscribed with a single word, "Remember." Its delicate script, barely visible beneath a light layer of frost, resonated with the promise of retribution and the possibility of reconciliation. In that charged moment, with the wind whispering through mesquite branches and the distant call of wild birds heralding another day, Maribel gathered her resolve. With Tall Bear at her side and the fragile symbols, the token, the feather, and the cryptic note and scrap, safely tucked close, she vowed to confront the tide of her past rearing up against her future. Her inner strength, honed by decades of pain and sacrifice, transformed into fierce determination. With the day's light growing ever brighter and the threat of the rider lingering like a shadow at the edges of her vision, Maribel stepped forward into a future she was determined to reclaim. Every step along the frost-hardened path was a defiant echo of her willingness to struggle and to survive. And though uncertainties danced before her like fleeting specters, the promise of redemption and hope shone in the gentle aura of dawn. Dawn finally began to break over the Texas frontier, melting the long shadows of night into hues of pale gold and silver. Yet the chill in Maribel Ortiz's heart remained, tethered to the haunting scrap left by the mysterious rider and the looming threat of her past. Inside the modest cabin at McKenna Ranch, the quiet clamor of the early morning, soft footsteps on frost, the low hum of a waking wind through mesquite groves, set a measured rhythm against an undercurrent of unresolved tension. Maribel stood by the frost-edged window, eyes fixed on the ridge beyond the property where, just last night, a dark silhouette had stirred the air. The scrap, still clutched in her trembling hand, bore the single word "remember" in a script as familiar as a forbidden memory. Every letter was a silent reminder that the past, with its betrayal and shame, still pursued her relentlessly. Across the room, Tall Bear watched her with deep, quiet eyes. His broad frame was steady and resolute, a living testament to the strength born of loss and exile. In that moment, he stepped quietly toward her, his weathered hand resting briefly on hers, imparting solidarity without words. Outside, fresh hoofprints disrupted the undisturbed blanket of snow, leading from the ridge toward the back of the ranch. Tall Bear's gaze followed the prints, his mind rehearsing old legends and half-whispered town rumors. "There's more to this, Maribel," he murmured softly, his gravelly voice laced with caution. "That rider, he's not merely a shadow from your past. I believe he bears a message of both warning and redemption." His words, though few, resonated like the toll of a distant bell. Maribel's eyes glistened with the mingled emotions of fear and defiant hope. "I know what it means," she whispered, her tone steadier than she felt. "I was cast out for what I am, and for what I survived. If someone tells me to remember, I must decide whether to be chained by memory or freed by it." Her voice, though soft, carried the fierce echo of a woman reclaiming her agency. She carefully folded away the scrap, tucking it inside her shawl as if to preserve its significance while symbolically locking it away. Yet a part of her knew that true peace could come only by confronting what it stood for. Across the room, Tall Bear lifted a carved wooden token from the table, the same that had been given to her when she arrived. Its details, etched in flowing lines representing both the blazing sun and a soaring eagle, glinted in the flame. "This token," he said, cradling it gently, "was bestowed upon those who have suffered and still choose to rise. It is not merely protection, but a sign that your story is not over yet." His rough hand met hers in a shared silence. Though words were sparse, their connection was deep. Two outcasts finding kinship in the desolation of the frontier. As Maribel absorbed his words, a sudden, subtle sound outside startled them both. A muted clatter that suggested the approach of a figure. Not quite the thunder of hostile riders, but an unmistakable sign that the threat was far from over. Tall Bear peeked through the frost-laden window. His eyes narrowed. "They've returned, or perhaps a scout has come to gauge our strength," he observed quietly. The tension deepened as he turned to Maribel. "We must be ready." Maribel gathered herself, fitting her resolve like armor before a battle. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her, the fabric now imbued with the promise of rebuild and redemption. "I will not run anymore," she declared, her voice echoing her vow from last night. "I have endured exile and pain, and now I stand to claim what will be mine, not as fate's casualty, but as my own." Her eyes, fierce and unblinking, sought reassurance in Tall Bear's steady gaze. Just then, Margaret's soft steps approached from the small room where the child slept. The orphan niece, ever perceptive beyond her years, entered the parlor clutching a small drawing. The crayon sketch depicted a ranch house under an expansive, starlit sky, with a solitary rider on horseback in the distance, an image both innocent and precocious. "Mama," Margaret murmured, her voice tentative yet imbued with a child's unyielding hope, "I think the rider is watching over us, not to hurt us, but to remind us that we're not alone." Her words, both tender and profound, eased a measure of the heavy silence. Tall Bear's expression softened at the fervor in Margaret's gaze. He knew all too well the burden of isolation, and her words struck him like a balm to his own scars. With a slow nod, he turned back to the window, his eyes scanning the snowy horizon. In the distance, among the mesquite trees and icy creeks, he spotted a glimmer, a flash of silver or perhaps a ring, that winked at him from a narrow ridgeline. It was too subtle to be certain, yet too deliberate to dismiss. "That may be a sign," he murmured, half to himself. Maribel lifted the folded scrap of paper from her shawl and unfolded it once more, reading silently. The letter bore the initial M, the source of all her nightmares, and now, with the reminder of the rider's symbol emerging, the pieces began to align in an unsettling pattern. The rider, unknown yet ever present, was not simply an omen of her past, but a guardian of sorts, a man whose own tragic journey might compel him to remain hidden, watching over those scorned by fate. The trio sat in that quiet moment, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the wooden floor, as the crisp morning air exhaled promises of change across the ranch. Tall Bear reached out and gently took Maribel's hand, his touch steady and warm amidst the cold anxiety. "We must confront this threat," he said, voice low and firm. "Not tomorrow, perhaps not today, but soon. The past has shadowed us long enough. It is time to unburden our souls and see what truth lies beyond these warnings." Maribel's gaze flickered between the token, the scrap, and the distant signs left by the rider. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "I will not hide forever," she vowed, eyes glistening with determination. "If my past seeks to drag me back into its darkness, then I will fight to forge a future in the light. Her words, though soft, carried the strength of a woman who had been wronged but refused to be defined by her scars. Outside, the soft crunch of fresh snow punctuated the silence as the mysterious rider advanced a bit further along the ridge. A gust of wind sent a flurry of dust and debris swirling around him, momentarily obscuring his figure, an affirmation of his elusive nature. Yet even in his fleeting visibility, the rider left behind traces. A small, intricately carved ring hidden beneath a tuft of clinging snow on a rock, its design matching the symbol on the feather Maribel had found. The sight was fleeting but unmistakable, and it confirmed that his intentions were not wholly malevolent. As the day's light edged higher and the chill began to give way to the soft warmth of morning, the atmosphere within the cabin shifted. The imminent threat had not vanished, but the tension was now layered with a fragile hope. Maribel and Tall Bear exchanged a determined look, silently affirming that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Margaret's drawing, now pinned to a makeshift corkboard near the doorway, served as a beacon of youthful promise, a vision that their shared future, though uncertain, would not be dictated solely by the scars of the past. In that crisp, dawning moment, Maribel gathered the letter, the wooden token, and the feather, each a symbol of both the threat and the possibility of redemption, and placed them carefully into a small leather pouch. "These will be my proof," she said softly, her voice steady against the backdrop of the awakening frontier, "that I have faced a tide that seeks to drag me back." Tall Bear nodded solemnly, his gaze never straying from the distant ridge where the rider's presence still lingered like a silent promise. Then, as if in response to their vow, a sudden, piercing cry, neither animal nor man, rushed across the plains, echoing off the snow-dusted pines. The sound was sharp and disruptive, signaling that the time for retreat might be at an end. The looming specter of the rider, now interwoven with the warnings of the past, stirred an urgency previously contained within the quiet sanctuary of the ranch. With hearts pounding and resolve hardening, Maribel clutched her shawl close and stepped toward Tall Bear. "I must learn who you are," she declared, voice trembling with raw determination, "and why you send these signs." Her eyes, deep with both pain and hope, met a steady gaze in silent communion. "For my past is to release me from its chains. I need to know its true face." Tall Bear's expression, usually so guarded, softened with empathy as he placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Be patient," he murmured. "Truth, like water from a hidden creek, surfaces when the time is right." Yet even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed a knowledge that danger, like a dark tide, might yet surge again, if they did not move soon to confront it. As the morning matured and light wove intricate patterns on the snow outside, the threat of the past remained etched upon their hearts. The mysterious ring left by the rider, the feather bearing its cryptic symbol, and the haunting words of the note all converged to form a tapestry of warning and possibility. Together, Maribel and Tall Bear prepared themselves for the inevitable confrontation, armed not only with physical implements, but with the fierce resilience born of suffering and hope. With one last lingering look at the distant ridge, where the rider's silhouette faded into the embrace of the emerging day, their decision crystallized. They would seek out the hidden truth behind those ominous signs, confront the shadow of Maribel's past, and, in doing so, forge a new destiny. As the wind carried the faint sound of distant hoofbeats and the promise of retribution, the future opened before them, shrouded yet beckoning. Dawn broke in a wash of soft gold and silver over the Texas frontier. The echo of the piercing cry that had shattered the night now faded into a gentle murmur, as if the land itself exhaled relief after a long, burdensome vigil. Inside the McKenna Ranch cabin, a heavy silence reigned. Maribel Ortiz stood by the frost-edged window, her eyes fixed on the far ridge where pursuers had been tracked and where the mysterious rider had made his presence known through cryptic tokens. A feather, a scrap inscribed "Remember," and now, what appeared to be a finely wrought ring glinting beneath the new light. Tall Bear, ever the silent guardian, remained close by, his proud, weathered features bore the marks of countless winters and personal loss, yet in his eyes burned a quiet fierceness. With a purposeful step, he crossed the room to stand beside Maribel. In that moment, their shared gaze spoke of the burden of their past and the determination to look forward. The symbols they carried, a carved wooden token, the delicate feather, the ominous note, and the unexpected ring, had become talismans linking their sorrow with a promise of redemption. Maribel, Tall Bear's deep voice broke the silence, measured and resolute. We have long wandered under the weight of our past. Today we claim our tomorrow. His hand, gloved and firm, rested on hers, offering reassurance beyond words. Maribel clutched the ring, a small, intricately carved piece of silver, adorned with subtle motif that echoed the wooden token's eagle and sun. Her heart pounded as she regarded it. The cool metal a tangible key to a mystery that haunted her ever since the note's warning. Slowly, she whispered, I have dreamed of a day when I could be free of these chains, and now, it seems, freedom comes with a price and promise forged by old memories. Outside, the chill wind carried the scent of mesquite smoke and damp earth as the first birds began their morning song over snow-dusted pines. The hoof prints that had trailed shyly near the ranch's shore while ago had nearly vanished under fresh frost. Yet, in the soft glow of sunrise, a solitary figure emerged along a narrow ridge. His silhouette, discernible against the pastel sky, moved with an assured grace. As he drew closer, the stranger revealed himself as the rider who had haunted Maribel's troubled dreams. His features were obscured beneath a wide-brimmed hat and a long duster, but the glint of the engraved ring at his belt caught the light, a mirror to the one now in Maribel's hand. For a lingering moment, Tall Bear and Maribel exchanged silent glances. Neither spoke as the rider halted just beyond the threshold, his gaze lingering over the ranch with a mixture of caution and sorrow. Then, as though compelled by a force older than the frontier itself, the rider dismounted with deliberate care. With measured steps, he approached the front door, where a faint aura of determination stirred the stagnant air. Maribel took a breath and, summoning her courage, stepped forward. Who are you? Her voice, steady yet edged with vulnerability, floated over the threshold. The rider's steady gaze met hers, and in his eyes Maribel glimpsed a profound sadness and a burden that mirrored her own. Slowly, he reached beneath his duster and produced a weathered leather-bound letter, its intricate seal bearing the same emblem as the carved token. My name is Manuel Reyes, he said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to carry the weight of many unspoken truths. I have ridden these lands for years, watching over those cast aside. It was I who left you these signs, as a reminder that you are not alone in your exile. A tremor passed through Maribel. The letter's presence, the ring's reflection, and now the revelation of Manuel's name unspooled memories of a past riddled with betrayal and desperation, a time when she had been condemned by those she had once trusted. Yet, as she looked at Manuel's solemn face, faintly illuminated by the rising sun, she sensed not malice, but regret and a fierce desire to atone. Why? She asked quietly, her tone betraying both curiosity and a lingering fear. Why watch over me? Manuel's eyes, dark and thoughtful, shifted toward Tall Bear, who regarded him with a guarded acceptance. I once belonged to a kin of honor, Manuel replied, and like you, I have known exile. My family was torn apart by endless gulfs of prejudice and sorrow. I swore that, if fate allowed me to survive, I would offer sanctuary to those who have been cast away by a world that fears what it does not understand. His gaze returned to Maribel. Your suffering, your resilience, they stirred something in me, a promise that perhaps, in protecting you, I might also redeem myself. Tall Bear's gaze wavered before turning back to the assembly in silent kinship. In that fragile tableau, Maribel felt an unexpected warmth kindle within her, a tentative merging of old scars and budding hope. The symbols of her past, the scrap of fabric from her old dress, the feather, the note signed M, now converged with Manuel's quietly confessional tone, weaving a tapestry of shared anguish and the prospect of healing. For long, a silence followed, dainty and heart-wrenching, as the inevitability of their communion settled among them. Rosa, swaddled in a faded blanket in the arms of Maribel, stirred with soft coos. Margaret, ever watchful and wise beyond her years, offered a small, trembling smile as if to say that now, in this intimate hour, hope was taking root. Manuel, the rider, carefully tucked the leather-bound letter into his satchel, his eyes never leaving Maribel's. "I have come to warn you," he said, voice low, "that those who cast you aside may soon return, not as saviors, but as heralds of deeper disgrace, a tide that seeks to drown all traces of love and honor. But if we stand together, we can defy their fury." Maribel swallowed hard, her resolve solidifying in the crucible of this unlikely meeting. "Then we shall stand together," she declared, her voice imbued with the quiet power of a woman reclaiming her future. "I choose to remember not the shame of the past, but the promise of what we can build from it." Her words, whispered with fierce determination, sent a ripple of approval through Tall Bear and a subtle nod from Manuel. The chill of early morning gradually gave way to a warmth that spread over McKenna Ranch like a promise. As Manuel prepared to mount his horse once more, his duty as protector not yet fully sated, the trio shared a moment of profound connection. Tall Bear handed Maribel a small embroidered scarf, its colors a muted tapestry of earth and sky, a sign of his own promise to guard her, while Manuel offered a token of his allegiance, a simple band of silver etched with ancient motifs. The same design echoed on the carved wooden token. In that quiet exchange of gifts, the boundaries between exile and belonging began to soften. Yet, even as the fragile bonds of kinship strengthened, the threat of the past loomed on the horizon. The wind carried distant murmurs, voices of townsfolk whose prejudice had once condemned Maribel, and the restless movements of those who would stop at nothing to reclaim what was lost. Manuel's eyes darkened. "Time is short," he murmured, almost to himself. "If we are to defy the tide, we must prepare now for what comes." Maribel, her eyes alight with a mix of courage and determination, clenched the embroidered scarf and the silver band close to her heart. "I will face them," she vowed, her voice trembling with both fear and fierce defiance. "No longer shall I be defined by what I once was. I now choose to define the future for Rosa, for Margaret, and for myself." Tall Bear's strong, silent presence and Manuel's solemn reassurance bolstered her resolve, and in that moment, the cold tyranny of the past lost some of its power. As the sun rose higher over the frost-kissed plains, its light gilded the rugged expanse with a promise of possibility. Manuel mounted his horse, his silhouette receding slowly into the brightening horizon, leaving behind the enigma of his identity and a trail of hope interlaced with lingering questions. Tall Bear and Maribel, with Rosa cradled near and Margaret's hopeful gaze fixed upon them, turned toward the ranch house. The future, uncertain and fraught with residual danger, unfurled before them like a long, winding path through the wilderness. Yet in their hearts, a shared strength, born of defiance, compassion, and the unyielding would overcome, gave him a reason to move forward. As they stepped onto the porch, the embroidered scarf fluttered softly in the gentle breeze, echoing a silent promise that the tide of judgment and rejection had been confronted and thwarted for now. Though the threat of those who had cast Maribel out still loomed like a dark specter in the corners of her memory, the day shone with a fragile, tender hope, the undeniable truth that redemption was possible when kindred spirits walked side by side. In that final moment before their departure to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Maribel and Tall Bear exchanged a look filled with unspoken vows, a promise that, together, they would not only survive but thrive. The silver band, the wooden token, the feather, the note, and now the embroidered scarf were more than mere relics of pain. They were symbols of a chosen family forged by resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of hope.